My name is Ella Reynolds, and at 68, I thought I'd seen it all. For years, I've cherished my role as grandmother to Amanda, pouring my heart and savings into her life. When she got engaged, I happily offered to fund her dream wedding. But 1 month before the $80,000 celebration, I overheard something that shattered my heart. I honestly hope she vanishes before the wedding. Amanda told her friend about me. So when she asked for even more money that day, I simply smiled, picked up my phone, and made a decision. Where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to teach someone a difficult lesson about gratitude. I've been blessed with a comfortable life, though not without its hardships. After losing my husband Richard to cancer 10 years ago, I threw myself into enjoying my retirement after a successful career as a finance executive in Boston. Our modest 3-bedroom home in the suburbs has been my sanctuary, filled with memories of our life together and visits from family. Amanda is my only granddaughter, daughter to my son David and his wife Karen. From the moment she was born 26 years ago, we shared a special connection. I still remember holding her tiny body in the hospital, those bright blue eyes looking up at me with what I swore was recognition, even as a newborn. "She knows her grandma," I'd whisper to Richard, who would smile and nod in agreement. As Amanda grew, our bond only strengthened. Weekends were often spent at my house, where I taught her to bake cookies using old family recipes passed down from my grandmother. Her little hands would get completely covered in flour as she giggled trying to roll out the dough. "Grandma Ella, look, I made it heart-shaped," she'd exclaim, proudly displaying her misshapen creation. "It's perfect, sweetheart," I'd reply every time, meaning it sincerely. Summer vacations meant trips to our modest cabin at Cape Cod, where Amanda and I would collect seashells along the shore. I kept a special box of the ones she selected throughout the years, each marked with the date and a small note about what made that day special. When Amanda started dance classes at age 8, I never missed a recital. Even when performances fell on weeknights and I had to drive 2 hours after work to make it, I was always there in the front row with flowers. The way her face lit up when she spotted me in the audience made every rushed drive worth it. Through her teenage years, when many grandchildren drift away, Amanda still made time for our Sunday dinners and occasional shopping trips. I helped her pick out her prom dress, consoled her through her first heartbreak, and celebrated when she was accepted to college. When she graduated with honors in marketing 4 years ago, I couldn't have been prouder. Amanda grew into what seemed to be a kind, thoughtful young woman with a bright future ahead. She landed a job at a marketing firm in the city and would still visit me at least twice a month, sometimes just to check in and share a cup of tea. That's why when she called me 2 years ago, bubbling with excitement about meeting someone special, I was genuinely happy for her. "His name is Jackson, Grandma. He works in finance and he's so smart and kind. I really want you to meet him," she gushed over the phone. Jackson Andrews turned out to be a tall, well-dressed man with a firm handshake and polite manners. He came from a wealthy family with connections throughout the New England business community. During our first dinner together, I observed how he treated Amanda with respect and seemed to genuinely care for her happiness. I approved, though something in his carefully calculated responses made me wonder if he was truly showing his authentic self. Their relationship progressed quickly. After just 14 months of dating, Amanda and Jackson announced their engagement during Thanksgiving dinner at my house. As everyone raised their glasses in celebration, I found myself tearing up with joy. "To Amanda and Jackson," I toasted, "may your life together be filled with as much love and adventure as your grandmother and grandfather shared." After dinner, while everyone was chatting in the living room, I pulled Amanda aside. "Sweetheart, I want to give you and Jackson a special gift," I told her. "Your grandfather and I always saved for this day. I'd like to pay for your wedding." Amanda's eyes widened in surprise before filling with tears. She threw her arms around me in a tight embrace. Oh, Grandma, are you serious? That would be amazing. You're the best grandmother anyone could ask for, she exclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. I promise you'll be involved in every step of planning. I want your input on everything. This means so much to me. As I held my granddaughter, I thought back to my own wedding 50 years earlier. Richard and I had married on a shoestring budget in my parents' backyard with just 30 guests. My dress was borrowed from a cousin, and we served a homemade buffet prepared by family members. Despite its simplicity, it remained one of the happiest days of my life. I wanted Amanda to have everything. I never had a chance to experience a beautiful venue, the perfect dress, exquisite flowers, and memories that would last a lifetime. I had set aside approximately $100,000 over the years for precisely this purpose, more than enough for a lovely wedding. The first planning meeting took place at my home with Amanda Jackson and his parents Thomas and Patricia Andrews. As we sat around my dining table with notebooks and wedding magazines, I noticed how Patricia subtly dominated the conversation, making suggestions about appropriate venues and vendors from their social circle. The Ocean View Club would be perfect, Patricia suggested. Thomas's golf partner is on the board there. We could secure you a date in peak season. I glanced at Amanda, expecting her to mention the garden venue she had once told me was her dream location. Instead, she nodded enthusiastically. That sounds amazing, doesn't it, Grandma? Amanda turned to me with expectant eyes. Whatever makes you happy, dear, I replied, noticing the first hint of tension in the air when Patricia gave me a quick appraising look. As everyone left that evening, Jackson's father Thomas patted my shoulder in a way that felt oddly condescending. Don't you worry about a thing, Ella. We'll make sure this wedding is appropriate for everyone involved, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I brushed off the uneasiness I felt. This was Amanda's special day, and I was determined to make it perfect for her, regardless of any subtle power plays from Jackson's family. 6 months. That's all the time we had to plan what was quickly becoming an extravagant affair. Amanda had initially talked about a fall wedding the following year, but suddenly, the date was set for June, just half a year away. Patricia suggested that the Ocean View Club had a rare summer opening due to a cancellation, and Amanda jumped at the opportunity without consulting me first. Our first venue tour came with an introduction to Stephanie Burke, a wedding planner with a reputation for organizing events for Boston's elite. With her sleek bob and perpetual Bluetooth earpiece, Stephanie carried an air of importance that seemed to instantly impress Amanda. The Ocean View Club is the premier wedding destination in New England, Stephanie explained as we walked through the grand ballroom with its crystal chandeliers and panoramic ocean views. We recently hosted the governor's daughter's wedding here. I watched Amanda's eyes widen with each impressive detail Stephanie pointed out. When we sat down to discuss pricing, I felt my first jolt of concern. For a standard summer Saturday wedding package, we start at $35,000 for just the venue and basic catering, Stephanie stated matter-of-factly. But given what Amanda has described as her vision, we'd recommend our premium package at $42,000. That was already more than I had planned to spend on the entire wedding. I cleared my throat gently. That seems quite steep. Perhaps we could look at some alternative dates or packages, I suggested. Amanda's face fell immediately. But Grandma, this is exactly what I've always wanted. You said you wanted me to have my dream wedding. Of course I do, sweetheart. I backtracked, not wanting to disappoint her. Let's see what we can work out with the budget. What had started as a reasonable $40,000 budget quickly expanded to $60,000, then $80,000, as Amanda's vision grew more elaborate with each planning meeting. Stephanie seemed to sense my discomfort, but always directed her questions about upgrades to Amanda, who unfailingly said yes to everything. It was around this time that Amanda's friends became more involved, especially her maid of honor, Tiffany. With her designer handbags and constant social media presence, Tiffany seemed to have a knack for making everything more expensive. "You absolutely can't have artificial flowers, Amanda," she declared during one planning session. "Everyone will be able to tell in the photos, and photos last forever." When the florist quoted $12,000 for the arrangements Tiffany deemed minimal but acceptable, I nearly choked on my tea, but Amanda was already nodding enthusiastically. Our first real argument came over the guest list. I had given Amanda a list of 15 of my closest friends, people who had known her since she was a child and who had celebrated every milestone in her life. "I'm sorry, Grandma, but we need to cut this down," Amanda said, red pen in hand, as she crossed off names. "The venue has strict capacity limits, and Jackson's parents have a lot of important business connections they need to invite." "But these are people who have been part of our family for decades," I protested, watching as she eliminated friends who had brought her birthday gifts every year of her life. "Surely they're more important than business associates you've never met." "It's not that simple," Amanda replied with a sigh that made me feel like I was being difficult. "These connections are important for Jackson's career. You understand, right?" I swallowed my hurt and nodded, not wanting to cause trouble. That evening, I had to make difficult calls to lifelong friends, explaining why they wouldn't be receiving invitations to my only granddaughter's wedding. Meanwhile, Amanda's social media accounts became dedicated to her wedding planning. She followed dozens of wedding influencers and constantly compared her plans to the lavish celebrations she saw online. "Look at this, Grandma," she would say, showing me photos of elaborate ice sculptures or release of butterflies. "Wouldn't this be amazing to include?" Our weekly planning brunches became less frequent. Amanda would cancel last minute, citing work commitments or appointments with vendors that couldn't be rescheduled. Our phone calls grew shorter, with Amanda always seeming distracted or in a rush. I confided my concerns to my best friend Barbara over coffee one afternoon. "I barely recognize her anymore, Barb," I admitted. "It's like this wedding has taken over her personality." "Weddings make people crazy," Barbara reassured me. "Remember how stressed you were before your own. She'll be back to normal once it's over." I wanted to believe that, but something felt different. This wasn't just stress. It was as if Amanda was transforming into someone else entirely. Someone who saw me as little more than a checkbook. The first major payment came due 3 months before the wedding, $45,000 for the venue deposit, catering minimum, and Stephanie's planning fee. I remember the weight of my hand as I wrote out the check, a mixture of pride in being able to provide this gift and concern about the person my granddaughter was becoming. As I handed Amanda the check, I expected a moment of gratitude or recognition of the magnitude of this gift. Instead, she barely looked up from her phone as she tucked it into her purse. "Thanks, Grandma. Oh, and we need to talk about the rehearsal dinner soon. Jackson's mom thinks the yacht club would be perfect." I nodded silently, wondering if Richard would recognize the entitled young woman sitting before me as the sweet granddaughter who once made heart-shaped cookies in our kitchen. With 3 months remaining before the wedding, Amanda's demands increased as quickly as her patience decreased. What had once been polite requests became expectations, and suggestions turned into mandates. "Stephanie says the designer dress allowance should be at least $8,000, Amanda informed me over the phone one evening. "The one I've fallen in love with is $10,000, but I can try to find something else if that's a problem." Her tone made it clear that finding something else would indeed be a problem, and she knew I wouldn't push back. I didn't. Another check was written, another boundary crossed. The floral arrangements, already extravagant at $12,000, suddenly needed an additional $3,000 worth of statement pieces for the cocktail area. The cake, initially a reasonable $1,000, now required special sugar flowers that added another $800. Every aspect of the wedding seemed to expand in cost and elaborate detail. Throughout these changes, Jackson remained largely silent. During our group planning meetings, he would occasionally nod in agreement with Amanda or his mother, but rarely expressed opinions of his own. When he did speak, it was often to support whatever new expense Amanda had decided was essential. "The photographer Amanda wants is the best in Boston," he'd say, It's worth the extra $2,000 for someone with his portfolio. Amanda's parents, my son David and his wife Karen, seemed to float on the periphery of these discussions. They had contributed a modest $5,000 to the wedding fund, which Amanda had promptly allocated to her honeymoon plans. When I tried to broach the subject of Amanda's changing attitude with David, he brushed off my concerns. "She's just stressed, Mom," he said. "Planning a wedding is a lot of pressure, and she wants to impress Jackson's family. They're very well connected." The venue itself became another point of contention. Despite having already put down a non-refundable deposit on the Ocean View Club, Amanda came to me in tears one afternoon. "Grandma, I found the perfect venue. It's Harborside Estate, right on the beach. It's where Chelsea Harrison had her wedding last year. She's this amazing influencer I follow." "But we've already booked the Ocean View Club," I reminded her gently. "We can't just forfeit that deposit." "I know, but this is so much better. Jackson's parents have connections with the owner. They can get us in on our date, but we have to decide right away." Her eyes filled with tears. This is my one chance to have the perfect wedding day. The Harborside Estate was nearly double the cost of the already expensive Ocean View Club. When I hesitated, Amanda's disappointment was palpable. "I thought you wanted me to have everything you never had," she said quietly, delivering the emotional blow with precision. I relented, of course. Another large check was written, another promise extracted that this would be the last major change. During a planning meeting at my home, I suggested incorporating some family traditions into the ceremony. I had carefully preserved my mother's lace handkerchief and my grandmother's pearl hairpin, both carried by generations of women in our family on their wedding days. "That's sweet, Grandma, but it doesn't really fit the aesthetic we're going for," Amanda replied dismissively. "We're aiming for a modern, clean look. Those old things would look out of place." Old things, she had called them. Not heirlooms or treasures, but old things that would disrupt her Instagram-perfect vision. I felt the sting of her words deeply, but swallowed my hurt yet again. "I understand," I said quietly, though I didn't understand at all how the granddaughter who had once loved hearing stories about these family treasures could now dismiss them so casually. As the wedding date approached, Amanda's comments about my age and ideas became more frequent and less veiled. "No offense, Grandma, but wedding styles have changed since the Stone Age," she remarked when I suggested a receiving line to greet guests. Her friends Tiffany and Lauren giggled at this while I pretended to smile along. "We need to make sure the photographer knows not to take too many photos of the older guests," she told Stephanie during another meeting. "We want the album to have a young, vibrant feel." I was sitting right there, obviously included in the older guests category that would apparently taint her precious wedding album. Each comment chipped away at my heart, but I continued to smile and nod, telling myself that this phase would pass once the wedding was over. During a tense dinner with the entire family, including Jackson's parents, I made one last attempt to incorporate something meaningful into the celebration. "I thought it might be nice if I gave a short toast at the reception," I suggested during a lull in conversation. "Just a few words about love and marriage from someone who had 50 wonderful years of experience." Before Amanda could respond, Patricia interjected smoothly. "The toasts have already been planned, Ella. The father of the bride, the best man, and the maid of honor. Any more would really disrupt the flow of the evening that Stephanie has carefully orchestrated." Amanda quickly nodded in agreement. "The schedule is really tight, Grandma, and we're trying to leave plenty of time for dancing." I noticed Jackson's father, Thomas, smirking slightly behind his wineglass. David looked uncomfortable but said nothing in my defense. I realized then that I had been systematically removed from any meaningful participation in the wedding beyond writing checks. I was just the bank, not the beloved grandmother I had thought I was. As each slight accumulated, I found myself emotionally withdrawing while still meeting every financial demand. When Amanda called with requests, I would simply ask, "How much?" and transfer the funds without discussion. I stopped offering suggestions or asking questions. What was the point? My opinions didn't matter, and my feelings certainly didn't either. What hurt most was remembering how Amanda had promised I would be involved in every step of planning, that my input would be valued. How quickly those promises had evaporated in the face of Instagram-worthy centerpieces and the approval of Jackson's socially connected family. The bridal shower was scheduled for exactly 1 month before the wedding. As the grandmother of the bride, I offered to host it at my home, one of the few contributions beyond money that had been accepted. Amanda and her bridesmaids took over the planning, relegating me to providing the venue and funding while they handled the details. The morning of the shower, I woke early to prepare my house. Despite everything, I was determined to make the day special for Amanda. I set out family photos throughout the living room, a small, subtle reminder of our history together. I picked fresh flowers from my garden for each table and prepared my famous strawberry punch, Amanda's childhood favorite. By 11 o'clock, the house was filled with women I mostly didn't know, Jackson's mother's friends, Amanda's co-workers, and her bridesmaids. I felt like a stranger in my own home as I served drinks and answered the door for late arrivals. Amanda arrived last, making an entrance in a white silk dress with her bridesmaids flanking her. She air-kissed my cheek as she entered, barely making contact. "Everything looks nice, Grandma," she said, her eyes already scanning the room for more important guests. The shower proceeded with the expected games and gift opening. I had spent weeks selecting the perfect gift, a handcrafted silver jewelry box containing the sapphire earrings Richard had given me on our 25th anniversary. When Amanda opened it, she gave a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "These are so vintage, thank you," she said, quickly setting them aside for the next gift, a high-end blender that received much more enthusiastic appreciation. After the gifts were opened and the games concluded, I went to the kitchen to prepare coffee and bring out the cake, a beautiful creation from Amanda's favorite bakery that had cost nearly $400. As I arranged cups on a tray, I heard the kitchen door swing open, followed by Amanda's voice, and another I recognized as Tiffany's. They clearly didn't realize I was there, partially hidden by the open refrigerator door. "Your grandmother's house is so quaint," Tiffany said, with a barely concealed sneer in her voice. "Very grandmotherly," Amanda sighed loudly. "Tell me about it. Everything in here is at least 100 years old, just like her." My hands froze on the coffee cups. I remained perfectly still, hoping they would leave before saying anything else that might break my heart. They didn't. "Is she still trying to get you to carry that ancient handkerchief or whatever?" Tiffany asked. "God, yes, and she wanted to give a toast at the reception. Can you imagine? She'd probably talk forever about 'in my day' and embarrass me in front of Jackson's family. They're so sophisticated, and she's just not." "At least she's footing the bill," Tiffany replied with a laugh. "That's what grandmas are for, right?" "True, though she questions every little expense like I'm trying to bankrupt her. She's sitting on a fortune from my grandfather and acts like the wedding is breaking the bank." I felt my throat tighten. Amanda had no idea about my financial situation. Yes, I was comfortable, but I had worked hard for every penny. The wedding was already taking a significant portion of my retirement savings, a fact I had kept from her to avoid making her feel guilty. "Well, just a few more weeks of dealing with her opinions," Tiffany consoled. "Then the wedding will be over and you can go back to the obligatory holiday visits." Then came the words that would change everything, words I can still hear clearly in my mind months later. "I honestly hope she vanishes before the wedding," Amanda said, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's so embarrassing with her old lady stories. No one wants to hear about how things were back in her day." Tiffany laughed. "Just seat her in the back with the other fossils. Speaking of which, did you talk to Stephanie about keeping the older guests out of the main photos?" "Definitely. I don't want my wedding album looking like a retirement home brochure." They both laughed again, and I heard the sound of glasses clinking in a toast. The kitchen door swung again as they left, neither having noticed me standing frozen by the refrigerator. I don't know how long I stood there, coffee forgotten, as their words echoed in my mind. I hope she vanishes before the wedding. My own granddaughter, my Amanda, had said those words about me. The little girl I had cherished, supported, and loved unconditionally for 26 years wanted me to disappear. Mechanically, I finished arranging the coffee cups, though my vision was blurred by unshed tears. I couldn't face the room full of women right now. Instead, I quietly slipped upstairs to my bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, trying to process what I'd just heard. As I sat there, memories flooded back the time 12-year-old Amanda had failed a math test and was afraid to tell her parents. I had helped her study every day for 2 weeks until she brought her grade up. The time she was bullied in 9th grade, and I drove to her school every day for a week to have lunch with her so she wouldn't have to eat alone. All the dance recitals, school plays, and soccer games I'd attended while her parents were working. The college application essays I'd helped her edit late into the night. The unconditional love I had given her every day of her life. And now I was just an embarrassment. An ATM with annoying opinions. Someone she wished would vanish. Eventually, I washed my face, reapplied my makeup, and returned downstairs. The party continued as if nothing had happened. Amanda was laughing with her friends, opening the remaining gifts. I served cake with a smile frozen on my face, making small talk with guests who probably saw me exactly as Amanda had described, just an old lady with outdated views and stories no one wanted to hear. As the shower wound down and guests began to leave, Amanda approached me with Tiffany beside her. "Grandma, everything was lovely," she said, her voice sweet now that others could hear. "Thank you so much for hosting." "It was my pleasure," I replied automatically, wondering if she could see the hurt in my eyes. "So, I wanted to ask you about one more thing for the honeymoon." Amanda continued, her tone shifting to the one she used when asking for money. "Jackson and I were thinking about upgrading our resort package in Bali. It's only an extra $4,000, but it includes a private villa with a plunge pool instead of just a regular suite." She looked at me expectantly, as if I would simply nod and reach for my checkbook as I had done dozens of times over the past months. Perhaps it was the lingering shock of what I'd overheard, but I found myself staring at her as if seeing a stranger wearing my granddaughter's face. "Is that something you could help with?" she prompted when I didn't immediately respond. "It would really make the honeymoon special." Beside her, Tiffany watched with barely concealed anticipation, probably wondering if the ATM would dispense more cash. I forced a smile, the most difficult smile of my life. "I'll take care of everything," I said, simply noting how quickly Amanda's expression brightened. "Let me get my phone and we can sort it out right now." As I turned to get my phone from my purse, I knew exactly what I needed to do. It was time for Grandma Ella to vanish, just as Amanda had wished. That evening, after all the guests had left and the caterers had cleared away the last of the shower debris, I sat alone at my dining room table surrounded by financial documents. Wedding invoices, bank statements, my investment portfolio, and my will were spread out before me like pieces of a puzzle I was finally seeing clearly. Over the past 6 months, I had already spent $45,000 on deposits and payments for Amanda's wedding. The remaining $35,000 for final payments was sitting in my checking account, ready to be dispersed over the coming weeks. Beyond that, I had always planned to give Amanda and Jackson a generous cash gift of $20,000 to help them start their married life, and my will designated Amanda as the primary beneficiary of my estate. I poured myself a rare glass of Richard's favorite scotch and took a long sip, feeling the warmth spread through my chest as I contemplated the papers before me. This wasn't just about money. This was about respect, appreciation, and the painful realization that the relationship I thought I had with my granddaughter was an illusion. I picked up my phone and called Barbara, my closest friend for over 40 years. "Barb, are you awake? I need to talk," I said when she answered. "Ella, what's wrong? You sound terrible," she replied, immediately concerned. I recounted what I had overheard, my voice breaking several times as I repeated Amanda's cruel words. Barbara listened without interrupting, then let out a long, sad sigh. "Oh, Ella, I'm so sorry. That's heartbreaking." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "Part of me wants to confront her, but another part just wants to, I don't know, vanish the money." Barbara suggested, a hint of justified anger in her voice. "Honey, you've been more than generous. More than she deserves, clearly." We talked for over an hour, discussing options and consequences. By the time we hung up, I had the outline of a plan, but I needed professional advice before proceeding. I barely slept that night, replaying Amanda's words and weighing my response. The next morning, I called Martin Wheeler, my financial advisor of 20 years, and scheduled an urgent meeting. 2 hours later, I was sitting in his office with my wedding expense spreadsheet. "This is quite a substantial sum for a wedding," Martin observed, reviewing the numbers. "And you say you've already paid $45,000? "Yes, non-refundable deposits primarily." I explained the situation, including what I had overheard. Martin was not just my advisor, but also a friend who had known Amanda since she was a child. I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Legally, you're under no obligation to pay for the rest," he confirmed. "It was a verbal gift promise, not a contract. The money is still yours." "And what about my will?" I asked quietly. Martin leaned back in his chair. "That's entirely at your discretion, Ella. You can amend it however you see fit." After consulting with Martin, I made a quick stop at my lawyer's office. By early afternoon, I was back home with a clear plan and the legal assurances I needed. Sitting at my kitchen table, I looked at the photo of Amanda on my refrigerator, her college graduation, her arms thrown around me as we both smiled broadly at the camera. How had we gone from that moment to, "I hope she vanishes"? Taking a deep breath, I picked up my phone and logged into my banking app. First, I transferred the remaining $35,000 allocated for the wedding into a separate savings account that Amanda couldn't access. Then I carefully composed a text message to Amanda. "Amanda, I overheard your conversation with Tiffany at the shower yesterday. I now understand your true feelings about me and my role in your wedding. I've already contributed $45,000 to your wedding, which covers the basics of your ceremony and reception. The additional funds for upgrades, extras, and your honeymoon will no longer be coming from me. Perhaps this is for the best, as you won't have to worry about your embarrassing grandmother ruining your special day. I need some time away to think about our relationship going forward. Grandma." My finger hovered over the send button for several long minutes before I finally pressed it. There was no going back now. I then made several other calls, changing my contributions to the guest welcome baskets, canceling the upgraded floral arrangements that hadn't been paid for yet, and informing Stephanie that any additional expenses would need to be approved and paid for by Amanda or Jackson directly. The final call was to a travel agent. "I'd like to book a 2-week trip to Italy," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Departing as soon as possible." Italy had been a dream destination for Richard and me. We had planned to go for our 50th anniversary, but his illness had made that impossible. Now I would go alone, a journey of both sadness and liberation. Within hours, I had a complete itinerary: Rome, Florence, Venice, and the Amalfi Coast. I would leave in 3 days and return just 3 days before the wedding, giving me time to decide if I would attend at all. I wrote a note for my house sitter, packed a single suitcase, and tried not to check my phone every 5 minutes. Amanda hadn't responded to my text, though I knew she must have read it. Perhaps she was in shock, or perhaps she was frantically figuring out how to pay for all the extras she'd arranged. The morning of my departure, I stood in my driveway waiting for the taxi to the airport, feeling both tremendous grief and unexpected lightness. As the cab pulled away from my home, I allowed myself to cry the tears I had been holding back. I cried for the little girl who had once loved her grandmother unconditionally. I cried for the woman I had thought my granddaughter had become. Mostly, I cried for the relationship that might never be the same again. By the time the plane lifted off American soil, my tears had dried, and I was looking forward with determination rather than backward with regret. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is setting boundaries, even when it breaks your heart to do so. The moment my plane landed in Rome, I turned on my phone to find it overflowing with notifications. 23 missed calls from Amanda, 12 from my son David, 5 from Karen, even 1 from Jackson. The voicemail box was full, and text messages continued to arrive in real time as I stood in the customs line. I didn't read them right away. Instead, I took a taxi to my charming hotel near the Spanish Steps, checked in, and ordered a glass of wine at the rooftop bar. Only then, watching the sunset paint Rome's ancient skyline in gold, did I begin to scroll through the messages. Amanda's texts evolved from confusion to anger to panic to pleading. "Grandma, what are you talking about? Call me. You can't just pull out of the wedding a month before. Do you know how many things aren't paid for yet? This is so unfair. You promised to pay for everything. Please call me back. I'm freaking out here. I'm sorry if you overheard something, but you don't understand the pressure I'm under. Mom and Dad can't help with this. Where are you? Please, Grandma. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. Please call me." The messages from David started with concern about my whereabouts, then shifted to defending Amanda. "Mom, where are you? We're worried. Amanda told us what happened. I'm sure there's a misunderstanding. She's young and stressed. You know how wedding planning is." Then, surprisingly, his tone changed in the later messages. "I talked to Amanda more about what happened. I'm disappointed in what she said. I understand why you're upset. We're going to figure this out. Please let us know you're safe. Love you, Mom." I took a long sip of wine, watching a young couple at the next table sharing a romantic moment. How simple love seemed when you were young before life revealed all its complicated edges. I decided to send a brief reply to David. "I'm in Italy, safe and well. We'll return 3 days before the wedding. Need this time to think. Love you too." I didn't respond to Amanda's messages. Not yet. I needed this distance to gain perspective, to decide how to move forward, without the raw sting of her words clouding my judgment. I turned my phone to silent and decided to immerse myself fully in the Italian experience I had dreamed of for so long. For the next 7 days, I explored Rome, Florence, and the Tuscan countryside with the wide-eyed wonder of someone half my age. I joined walking tours, savored long lunches at small trattorias, and sipped espresso in ancient piazzas. Each day I checked my messages, once noting the continuing stream from Amanda and occasional updates from David, but I maintained my silence. On my 8th day in Italy, as I sat in a small restaurant in Positano, overlooking the Mediterranean, I received a text from Jackson, the first direct communication from him throughout this ordeal. "Mrs. Reynolds, I want to apologize for Amanda's behavior and for my own passive role in all this. I should have spoken up sooner about the excessive spending and the way you were being treated. I'm working with Amanda to scale back the wedding to what we can afford without your additional help. I hope you'll still attend. It would mean a lot to both of us despite everything." His message surprised me. Perhaps there was more substance to Jackson than I had given him credit for. I replied briefly, "Thank you, Jackson. I appreciate your message and will consider attending." As my Italian journey continued, I found myself rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I made friends with a group of British retirees on a similar tour. I tried new foods, bought a colorful scarf from a street vendor, and even allowed a charming silver-haired Italian cafe owner to flirt harmlessly with me over my daily cappuccino. For the first time since Richard's death, I felt fully alive, not just existing as someone's mother or grandmother, but as Ella, a woman with her own desires, opinions, and worth. The distance also gave me clarity about Amanda and our relationship. I realized that my unconditional giving had enabled her entitled behavior. By never setting boundaries, I had contributed to the problem. This wasn't just about Amanda's hurtful words. It was about years of an unbalanced relationship where my role had diminished to provider rather than respected elder. When my plane landed back in Boston 3 days before the wedding, I felt transformed, stronger, clearer, and ready to face whatever came next. David was waiting at the airport arrivals area, his face a mixture of relief and concern. "Mom," he said, embracing me tightly. "You look different. Good different." "Italy agrees with me," I replied with a smile. "How are things here?" "Chaotic," he admitted as we walked to his car. "Amanda's been, well, it's been difficult. She and Jackson have had to make a lot of changes to the wedding plans. I think it's been a wake-up call." "And how do you feel about all this?" I asked, watching his profile as he drove. David sighed deeply. "Disappointed in Amanda. Proud of you for standing up for yourself. A little embarrassed that I didn't see what was happening sooner." We drove in silence for a while before he added, "She wants to see you, to apologize in person." "I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet," I admitted. Her words hurt deeply, David. "I know, Mom. Take your time. But for what it's worth, I think she's genuinely sorry." When David dropped me at my home, I found it clean and well kept with fresh flowers on the kitchen table, a peace offering from Amanda, no doubt. I unpacked slowly, readjusting to being back in my space, now seeing it through new eyes. It wasn't just an old lady's house, as Amanda had described it. It was a home filled with memories, love, and character. Something the sterile, Instagram-ready aesthetic Amanda had embraced could never capture. I had just made myself a cup of tea when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Amanda Jackson and my son standing on the porch. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Amanda looked different, smaller somehow, with no makeup and reddened eyes that suggested recent tears. Jackson stood slightly behind her, his hand supportively on her shoulder. David gave me an encouraging nod. "Grandma," Amanda said, her voice breaking. "Can we talk?" I stepped back silently, allowing them into the living room. No one sat immediately, the tension making casual gestures impossible. "I believe you have something to say to me," I said finally, my voice calm but firm. Amanda's composure crumbled. "I'm so sorry, Grandma. What I said was terrible, unforgivable. I don't know what happened to me these past months. I got so caught up in everything, in having the perfect wedding, in impressing Jackson's family, in what my friends would think, that I forgot what really matters." "Which is," I prompted, not making this easy for her. "Family, love, gratitude." She wiped at her tears. "Everything you've taught me my whole life that I somehow forgot." Jackson stepped forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, I want to take responsibility too. I should have put a stop to the excessive spending and the way you were being treated. I was so focused on keeping Amanda happy that I lost sight of what was right." I looked at them both, these young people who had caused me such pain. Part of me wanted to embrace Amanda immediately to comfort her, as I always had. But another part, the stronger part that had emerged in Italy, held back. "What you said hurt me deeply," I told Amanda. "Not just at the shower, but all the little comments over the months. The dismissals of my input, the eye rolls, the jokes about my age. I became nothing more than a checkbook to you." "That's not true," Amanda protested weakly. "It became true," I corrected. "And that's not the relationship I want with my granddaughter." I turned to address the financial situation directly. "I've already contributed $45,000 to your wedding. That's an enormous gift, and it should be enough for a beautiful, meaningful celebration. The extra $35,000 I withheld was for upgrades that were excessive and unnecessary." "We know," Jackson said, surprising me. "We've scaled everything back, canceled the ice sculpture, the extra floral installations, the celebrity DJ. We're having a simpler wedding, and honestly, it feels more like us anyway." Amanda nodded. "We even changed the menu to include your grandmother's famous apple tart for dessert instead of the $1,000 cake. If you'll share the recipe." The mention of my apple tart, a family recipe I had taught Amanda years ago, felt like the first genuine connection between us in months. "The wedding will still be beautiful," David added, "just not quite as extravagant." I looked at my granddaughter's tear-stained face, searching for the Amanda I had known and loved all her life. She was there beneath the layers of entitlement and social media influence that had temporarily buried her true self. "Will you still come to the wedding?" Amanda asked in a small voice. "I understand if you don't want to, but it wouldn't be the same without you." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked, "Have you learned anything from this experience, Amanda?" She nodded slowly. "That I treated the person who loves me most like she didn't matter. That I got so caught up in the wedding that I forgot about the marriage and the people who truly care about me. That having a grandmother who wants to be part of my life is a blessing, not an embarrassment." Her words seemed sincere, though only time would tell if the lesson had truly taken root. "I'll attend the wedding," I said finally. "Not because all is forgiven, but because healing has to start somewhere." Relief washed over Amanda's face, followed quickly by renewed tears. This time, I did step forward to embrace her, feeling her body shake with sobs against mine. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. "I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Just remember how you feel right now." I told her gently. "Remember that relationships matter more than appearances, and gratitude matters more than getting your way." As they prepared to leave, Jackson paused at the door. "The wedding is going to be better this way," he said with surprising wisdom. "More about love and less about showing off." I nodded, thinking that perhaps there was hope for them after all. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter. The conversation had gone better than I expected, though I knew our relationship would take time to fully heal. Trust once broken doesn't mend overnight. I looked at the wedding invitation still displayed on my mantle and made a decision. I would attend not just as a guest, but as Amanda's grandmother, with all the love, wisdom, and boundaries that role deserved. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect June day that seemed determined to make the celebration beautiful, regardless of budget constraints. I dressed carefully in a pale blue silk dress I had purchased in Italy, adding pearl earrings that had been my mother's. Around my neck, I wore the sapphire pendant that matched the earrings I had given Amanda a gift I wasn't sure she would choose to wear today. I had received no formal apology from Jackson's parents, though David mentioned they had been put in their place by their son regarding their treatment of me. I prepared myself for potential awkwardness, determined to maintain my dignity regardless of how they behaved. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock at Harborside Estate. When I arrived, I was surprised to see how lovely everything looked despite the scaled-back arrangements. The floral displays were simpler than originally planned, but elegant and tasteful. The guest list had been reduced to around 100 people rather than the 150 of the initial plan, creating a more intimate atmosphere. I was even more surprised when an usher approached me. "Mrs. Reynolds, the bride requested that you be seated in the front row directly across from her parents." A place of honor not hidden away with the fossils, as Amanda and Tiffany had joked. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. When Amanda appeared at the end of the aisle, my breath caught. She looked radiant in a gown that I suspected was not the $10,000 designer dress she had originally selected. Around her neck gleamed the sapphire earrings I had given her at the shower, and in her hand, wrapped around her bouquet, was my mother's lace handkerchief. Our eyes met as she passed my seat, and she gave me a small, genuine smile, one that reminded me of the Amanda I had known before all this began. I felt tears spring to my eyes, these ones not of hurt, but of cautious hope. At the reception, I was prepared to keep to myself, perhaps chat with the few friends of mine who had made the final guest list. Instead, I found myself approached by Amanda and Jackson almost immediately after they entered. "Grandma, would you come with us for a moment?" Amanda asked, her expression nervous but determined. "There's something we'd like to talk about privately." Jackson led us to a small side room where we could speak without interruption. Once the door closed behind us, Amanda turned to me. "I need to say this without an audience," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "What I said about you was unforgivable. There's no excuse. Not stress, not wedding pressure, nothing that justifies how I spoke about you or treated you." This was different from the tearful apology at my house. This was a woman taking full responsibility without making herself the center of the emotion. "The last few weeks have been the most humbling of my life," she continued. "Having to call vendors and scale back plans, explaining to friends that certain essentials weren't happening anymore. But it was also clarifying. It made me see how caught up I'd gotten in impressing others instead of appreciating what truly matters." Jackson nodded beside her. "We've had some serious conversations about values and priorities, about the kind of marriage and life we want to build. I don't expect things to be instantly fixed between us," Amanda said, meeting my eyes directly. "But I want you to know that I'm committed to rebuilding your trust, to being the granddaughter you deserve." What touched me most was that she didn't ask for anything in return. Not forgiveness, not money, not even a response. It was an apology given without expectation, perhaps the first truly selfless thing she had done in many months. "Thank you, Amanda," I replied simply. "That means a lot to me." She nodded, seeming to understand that reconciliation would be a process, not an instant restoration. "There's one more thing," she said, reaching into a small bag I hadn't noticed she was carrying. From it, she withdrew a small blue velvet box. "This was going to be a surprise during the toasts, but I wanted to give it to you privately." Inside the box was a delicate gold bracelet with 3 small charms, a heart, a book, and a tiny rolling pin, symbols of our relationship throughout the years. "I had it made before everything happened," Amanda explained. "To thank you for making the wedding possible. But now it means something more. It's a promise to remember what you've taught me about love learning and creating something meaningful with your hands and heart." The gift was unexpectedly thoughtful, connecting to our shared history, rather than just the wedding itself. I allowed her to fasten it around my wrist, noticing that Jackson was watching with approving eyes, rather than the impatience I might have expected a few weeks earlier. "We should get back to the reception," I said finally. Your guests will be wondering where the bride and groom have gone. They can wait, Amanda replied with a small smile. Some things are more important than keeping to the schedule. As we returned to the reception, I noticed that Amanda had indeed been seated at the head table. What surprised me was that there was a place card with my name directly beside her, where Tiffany might have expected to sit as a maid of honor. Is this right? I asked, confused by the arrangement. Absolutely, Amanda confirmed. I want you beside me today, if that's okay with you. It was a public statement of priority one that couldn't have been easy to make given the wedding politics involved. I took my seat with a nod, noticing Tiffany's poorly concealed displeasure from her position further down the table. Throughout the reception, I observed subtle but significant changes in both Amanda and Jackson. They seemed more present with each guest, less concerned with photo opportunities, more focused on genuine connection. When it came time for toasts, I was surprised when Amanda stood and clinked her glass. We have the traditional toasts coming up, she announced to the room. But first, I'd like to break with tradition and ask my grandmother, Ella Reynolds, to say a few words. A microphone appeared before me, and I found myself facing a room full of expectant faces. I hadn't prepared anything, but as I looked at Amanda, her expression open and encouraging, I knew exactly what to say. Love, I began, is not about perfect photos or elaborate celebrations. It's about showing up for each other through difficulties as well as joys. It's about growing together, sometimes painfully, into better versions of yourselves. I looked directly at Amanda and Jackson. Today, I've seen glimpses of the strong, compassionate people you both are becoming. Marriage will test you, challenge you, and if you let it, refine you. Remember to treat each other with the respect and gratitude that everyone deserves, especially those who love you most. There was a moment of weighted silence before applause broke out. Amanda's eyes shimmered with tears as she stood to embrace me, whispering, "Thank you," against my ear. Later, as dancing began, I found myself approached by various guests, including several of Jackson's family friends, who seemed to have received the memo that I was not in fact just an old lady to be tolerated, but a person worthy of respect. I didn't stay until the end of the reception. At 68, I no longer had the stamina for celebrations that continued past midnight. As I prepared to leave, I found Amanda by the dance floor. "I'm heading home, dear," I told her. "Already?" Her disappointment seemed genuine. "I've had a wonderful time," I assured her, "and you have many friends to celebrate with." Amanda looked around at the crowded dance floor, then back at me. "None as important as you," she said, simply squeezing my hand. "Thank you for coming today, for giving me another chance." "We're family," I replied. "That doesn't end over a single mistake, even a painful one." As my taxi pulled away from the venue, I watched the lights of the celebration fade behind me. The day had been far different than I had imagined when I first offered to pay for Amanda's wedding nearly a year ago. The journey had been painful, but perhaps necessary for us both to grow. I touched the bracelet on my wrist, thinking that second chances like weddings were really just beginnings. The real work lay in all the days that followed. 3 months passed after the wedding. Autumn painted my garden in shades of gold and crimson. As I settled back into my routine, enriched by new hobbies I had discovered during my Italian journey. I had started taking a watercolor class and joined a book club focused on international literature, gradually rebuilding a life that felt fulfilling and independent. Amanda and Jackson had returned from their honeymoon, a simpler version of their original plans, but from their photos, no less enjoyable. The first few weeks after their return had been tentative between us. Amanda would call once a week, our conversations polite but cautious, both of us feeling our way forward in this new version of our relationship. Then one Sunday, they appeared at my door unannounced, carrying a homemade apple pie. "We thought we'd try your recipe," Amanda explained as I invited them in. It's not as good as yours, but we're learning. That afternoon marked a turning point. As we shared pie and coffee in my kitchen, the conversation flowed more naturally than it had in months. Amanda asked about my watercolor class, showing genuine interest. Jackson discussed their new apartment and the furniture they were slowly acquiring. We decided not to buy everything at once, he explained. We want to find pieces that have meaning, that tell a story. Like your home, Amanda added, looking around my kitchen with new appreciation. Everything here has history. I noticed other changes too. Amanda mentioned deleting most of her social media accounts. It was making me compare my life to everyone else's highlights, she admitted. I'm trying to be more present in the actual moments instead of thinking about how they'd look online. These Sunday visits became a new tradition. Sometimes David and Karen would join us, creating multi-generational gatherings around my dining table. I observed Amanda watching how I hosted, asking questions about family recipes, noting the small touches that made a house a home. I also began to see a therapist, Dr. Winters, a kind woman in her 50s, who helped me process the wedding experience and establish healthier boundaries. You're modeling self-respect for Amanda, she assured me during one session. That's a powerful legacy to leave. In late October, Amanda called and asked if we could have dinner, just the two of us. We met at a small Italian restaurant where I had become something of a regular since my return from Italy. Over pasta, Amanda seemed nervous, fiddling with her napkin in a way that reminded me of her childhood habits. Everything okay with you and Jackson? I asked, concerned by her demeanor. Yes, everything's wonderful, actually. She took a deep breath. Grandma, I wanted to tell you something important, and I wanted you to be the first to know. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope, sliding it across the table to me. Inside was a black and white image that I recognized immediately, an ultrasound. I'm pregnant, Amanda said, her voice a mixture of excitement and vulnerability. 12 weeks along. The doctor says everything looks perfect. Joy bubbled up inside me, pure and uncomplicated. Oh, Amanda, that's wonderful news. You're going to be a great grandmother, she continued, her eyes shining. And I want this baby to know you, the real you, not the version of you I tried to minimize during the wedding. I want my child to hear your stories, to learn from your wisdom, to know their family history. I reached across the table to take her hand, feeling the full circle of our journey together. I'd like that very much. I've been thinking a lot about what you taught me, Amanda said, about what matters in life. I don't want my child to ever think that appearances or impressing others is more important than being kind and grateful. I want to be the kind of mother who teaches values, not vanity. We talked long into the evening about motherhood, about family traditions we could pass down, about the kind of grandmother I had tried to be, and the kind of mother she hoped to become. As we parted outside the restaurant, Amanda embraced me tightly. I'm so sorry for what I put you through, she whispered. But I'm also grateful for the lesson. It changed me for the better. Sometimes the most painful experiences are the ones that help us grow the most, I replied, thinking of my own journey over the past year. Driving home that night, I reflected on the strange, difficult path that had brought us to this moment. When I had overheard Amanda wishing I would vanish, I could never have imagined that her cruel words would ultimately lead to a deeper, more authentic relationship between us. By withdrawing my financial support, I had actually given her something more valuable, a chance to recognize what truly mattered. The following weekend, Amanda helped me clear out my spare bedroom to begin transforming it into a nursery for when the baby would visit. As we sorted through old toys and books I had saved from her childhood, Amanda paused, holding a well-worn teddy bear. I remember this, she said softly. You used to tell me stories about how he would go on adventures while everyone was sleeping. You had quite the imagination, I replied, smiling at the memory. You wanted a new story every night. Amanda carefully set the bear aside in the keep pile. I want to tell those stories to my baby too, she said, and add new ones. Life continues to move forward. The baby is due in May, a spring child, who will never know the tension that once existed between their mother and great-grandmother. Amanda calls me several times a week now, asking advice about pregnancy, sharing her hopes and fears about motherhood. I listen, offer what wisdom I have, and cherish each conversation. Jackson has proven to be a better man than I initially gave him credit for. He stood by Amanda through the humbling experience of scaling back their wedding, and I've watched him grow into a thoughtful husband who values substance over status. They're building a life based on what matters to them, not what impresses others. As for me, I've learned that sometimes love means disappearing, not physically, but removing the supports that enable harmful behavior. Sometimes, the most generous thing we can do for those we love is to let them experience the consequences of their actions. I've also discovered that it's never too late to rediscover yourself. My trip to Italy opened doors I thought had closed with Richard's death. I'm planning another journey next year, perhaps to Greece. Amanda has insisted I go, promising to email ultrasound updates while I'm away. The money I had set aside for Amanda's wedding extras and cash gift has been partially reallocated. Some remains for the baby's future education fund, but I've also established a scholarship for young women pursuing careers in finance, my own field. Paying forward the opportunities I had seems like the right way to honor the lessons of this past year. If there's wisdom I could share from this experience, it would be this: true love sometimes requires difficult boundaries. Respect is as essential as affection. And it's never too late to heal a relationship if both parties are willing to do the honest work of reconciliation. When Amanda wished I would vanish, she never imagined that I would indeed disappear, along with my checkbook. But sometimes, vanishing is exactly what's needed to be truly seen again. Have you ever had to teach someone a difficult lesson about gratitude and respect? Did it change your relationship for better or worse? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my experience, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who might be struggling with setting boundaries with loved ones. Thank you for listening to my story today. Remember, sometimes the most painful chapters lead to the most beautiful endings.